That's better.
Mm-hmm.
I would have made a boy band joke, but I don't know any NSYNC songs off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, You Don't Know You're Beautiful or something. That's Backstreet Boys,
Yep.
Stuff like that. It's like, I don't know my 90s boy bands, and I'm,
Okay
that's not a
with that.
problem.
I'm okay
I
with
don't
that.
find that to be a problem.
You Don't Know You're Beautiful's One Direction.
Exactly.
I don't
Yep.
know.
That was
Case in point.
exactly. Exactly.
My favorite commentary on boy bands was probably the episode of Gravity Falls where they, where there's the robot, or where it was like a boy band comprised of clones, or something like that.
I
But
see.
Aren't they all?
yeah, exactly.
Were they all voiced by D. Bradley Baker?
Not in this case.
Oh, okay.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have like complete and total monopoly over clone voicing. But anyway,
At any rate,
yeah.
yeah.
So speaking of clones, no. Our the wedding was good. Good times were had.
Yes.
Or good times were had by people not me. I mean, I had
Yeah.
a good time at the wedding. I didn't have a good time
But
getting to
subsequently-
the wedding.
Ah, yes.
And
the whole plane hassle. You got back with little issue though, right?
Yeah, the way back was pretty uneventful for sure.
Okay.
But the way back up home was full
Bit dodgy.
of delays.
Well, there was a huge winter storm that passed over all of the North America that week. I know I was affected by it. Like the Friday before the wedding, I got a text at 4:00 from my supervisor saying, "Hey, don't come into work. There's no plane."
Oh, okay. See, I remember I was walking out. I went out to go to work in the morning. I was like, "Wait, there's still snow on Nathan's car.
That's
The plane must not have come today."
yeah. I got told ahead of time. I'm like, "Thanks." Rolled over and tried to go back to sleep.
There you go.
So yeah, it was kind of a messy week for air travel last week. So
Evidently.
lucky you made it.
Yeah, made it with about 15 minutes to spare.
Yeah.
Oh
Just
yeah.
enough time to get dressed and then eat some lunch and then head to the
Yep.
service.
I walked into Grand Junction wearing my cassock and fascia. I took the collar off so nobody would think I was a priest, because
Mhm.
I'm not.
Yep. But to the common observer, unfamiliar with the way seminarians work, yeah, that could be confusing. It's just like, if anybody asks us, Matrix cosplay.
He doesn't have the sunglasses though, and it's not a trench coat.
No, well,
But it looks vaguely like a trench coat.
Vaguely, it's just not the right material for it.
yeah. But at any rate, the wedding was fun.
Indeed.
Filming went really well. I was very physically exhausted the next day.
Oh yeah.
Carrying around I didn't really dance that much at the wedding, but I was lugging around. I never weighed it, but it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 15, 20 pounds worth
Just
of camera equipment all
A
day.
rented camera.
Yep. So it was, could I go with a lighter camera? Yeah, but I like the footage that this one gets. So
Besides, you don't smoke. Why would you need a lighter camera?
exactly. There's a camera. I wonder, there's probably a
Oh, there
camera
definitely
shaped
is
lighter.
some kind of gimmick lighter that looks like a camera.
mm-hmm.
I guarantee you.
Or a gimmick camera that looks like a lighter.
Oh, yeah. For
You know, probably that too. If
for you
you're-
spy types out there.
Yeah.
If you're listening and we know
Mr.
you are.
Bond, I've got some new equipment for you.
If any of you CIA types are listening, and we know you are.
Hi, FBI agent. How you doing? I know nobody checks in on you. It's a thankless job.
Just
I've been a good
somehow
boy.
talks back.
The
through
worst part of
podcast.
it is that we all know you're NSA agents that are actually listening to us,
Mhm.
but everyone thinks you're the FBI, so it's
And it's
even
more-
more thankless. because we can't even get the agency right.
Right. The meme is the FBI, which is like, right.
Anyway, we're sidetracked again.
Of course, this is the banter.
I know.
We're supposed to get.
Point
No,
is
James,
to
we're
get
supposed to get sidetracked.
I know, but I just wanted to say congratulations.
We get all of our sidetrack out of our system before we summarize.
Congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Fisher. Okay, there, I got that.
Good job.
I was working my way towards that. But they're done murd now, so
they said the thing.
They did.
They said the thing, and now we only have one listener.
The two
Except
have
we have two
one
listeners because
we have two listeners.
Will always be two listeners.
Right.
Yes, it's a monolithic two listeners. That's the bit.
It shall never not be.
Indeed.
Yes, indeed. So good times.
Good times ahead by all. I'm pooped.
Speaking of NSA, NASA. Evidently, I know. Evidently, they're planning on the retirement, quote unquote, of the International Space Station sometime in the near future. I just saw an article. It's like, here's the plan to crash the ISS into the Pacific Ocean. It's like, you know what? That's a good spot. I wonder how much is going to be left of that thing, because you'd think they'd want to stick that in like the Smithsonian or something, but I don't actually know how big it is.
I mean, it's large enough to contain several people for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So,
it's probably has the record for longest fall by a man-made object, if you want to get really technical with the physics.
Technically, it's been falling for years now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are several satellites that have probably been falling longer than it.
Possibly, yeah. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. You're
gonna work on an ISS too, you suppose? With like
maybe
if ISS was so good, why wasn't there an ISS too?
That's what ISIS was. They messed up on the Roman numerals. Anyway, I growing up, there was we for whatever reason had the NASA channel, which would just play random NASA-related stuff. I remember being quite fascinated with it, even though the majority of the time it was just like footage from a space shuttle or something that's completely unedited with no commentary.
Dude, space is cool.
It was definitely cool.
Rockets go
are cool.
brr.
Brr. The Challenger explosion obviously was like the really famous one, but I'd almost kind of forgotten about it. But wasn't there? What was it? There was another one that
one of the Apollos blew up, I think.
Well, no, but I mean, like in 2003, there was another space shuttle that exploded on takeoff. Or no, it was on re-entry that time. What was it though? Was it? It's on the tip of my tongue. Explorer or something like not that, but
I'm not
because I vaguely remember that as a kid hearing about that. But and then like understanding like, oh yeah, it's because there was some flaw in the heat absorbing tiles or something like that.
I mean, if a thing explodes that wasn't meant to explode, it means there's a flaw in the system.
Mm-hmm.
If it was meant to explode, then it worked flawlessly.
Well, the flaw worked flawlessly.
Right, exactly. Well,
it was intentional.
It was an intentional, yeah. It was intentional that reaction happened.
Yep.
No.
Space. I probably talked about Zathura on the podcast before.
I don't think so.
Maybe? Okay, or maybe it was in the chat, but there was this children's book by the same guy who wrote...
I've seen the movie.
Yeah. It was the same guy who wrote Jumanji.
Oh.
And it was like this kid and his brother and sister or whatever their house just gets randomly transported to the middle of space. And there's like this alien lurking around the house and a robot that wants to fight the alien, and they both want to kill the kids. It's I just remember that and the illustrations being like super creepy. At least the whole aura of it was. And I completely forgot about it until I just came across it on the internet one day. I was like, oh crap, this was a real thing.
All my repressed memories are coming back to me now.
It was so weird because, and then the book just kind of ends too. There's nothing really happens.
No resolution. They don't get back home.
Like the house just like is back in their street all of a sudden.
So they do resolve. They go back home. It's just
right, but it's never explained how or why. They're just like, oh, we're back now.
It's a children's book. They don't question the world.
I know, but I was
all
questioning.
Children do.
I was very much questioning this book the whole time. Because, I don't know, I was at the age where I was just reading anything I could get my hands on. And so this was like one of the weird books we had in the corner of the bookshelf. And yeah, I always felt like uncomfy reading it. It had like that weird sort of, like akin to the feeling of being watched. Not that I felt like I was being watched when I was reading that book. But not like it was, because let's be real, it was probably Aaron or Andre that was like gonna like throw something at me or whatever. But I don't know. I just have, speaking of space, I just have very striking memories of this bizarre book. I don't know what the movie was like, but
it was probably, I haven't seen it. I don't know.
I got similar vibes from the movie.
Yeah,
it was just kind of. I was expecting a fun, cool space adventure thing, and what I got was
existential dread,
creepy and existential dread. Yeah.
Like a suspense thriller for kids.
Yeah,
it's Alien, but for kids.
Pretty much. I just remember the alien in the illustration looked kind of like a couch cushion. Or no. That was a different book.
Huh.
There were the Wally McDougall books by like some Christian guy from the 90s. And there was one where, because, you know, he's just a super klutzy kid who gets into wacky situations and then learns about Jesus, you know, that type of 90s stuff. But at one point he's like on this movie set and he's being picked up by this mechanical giant alien, and the illustration on the front was like mildly realistic looking. That was, for whatever, it was like a one-eyed alien-looking creature. That's what reminded me of the Zathra thing. We're just going all kind. You guys are talking about getting sidetracked. I'm getting sidetracked. But yeah, the illustration, it just looked like it looked like
just like the Glob Glow Gab Galab.
I love books. Remember when the guy who made that was really cool about the memes until he wasn't?
Then he wasn't.
Yeah. That was a whole thing.
I am the Glob Glow Gab Galab, the Schlabble Wabble Dibble Dabble Babble Flap.
I do think it's fun when like the people involved with the original project or like get into the memes or kind of, they may not get it, but they like get into it. It's like, okay, sure, I accept this as part of the thing. Like when what is his name? Bill Hader, the voice of Solid Snake, did the Colonel, I'm trying to sneak around, but I'm dummy thick.
No, Bill Hader is
not
this SNL guy.
No,
he's the guy from SNL.
He is. What? I think I am bad at names. It's something that begins with Nate. She's a Daniel. I gotta look it up. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Because you get names that are similar and they get crosswired in your brain sometimes.
Yeah.
Philip Sacramento. Philanthropy. No, David Hayter.
So
it was, he had the right name.
Had the right last name, not
yeah.
the right first name.
Except it's spelled differently.
Sure. It just has the same
Bill
consonants
Hader.
and vowels.
It was probably just spelled slightly differently by the customs person that day on Ellis Island, let's be real.
Or it has a different root word and he's from a different country. I don't know.
Yeah. That could also be. According to my Facebook memories posting about, hey, we have a podcast coming up, it appears we're getting right up on our 2nd anniversary of the podcast.
It is true.
And we're also coming up on our 100th episode, aren't we? This is what, 93?
You have 7 episodes left before episode 100. We haven't even started to think about what we're going to do for that, but we'll figure something out.
We have the better part of 2 months to figure that out. So,
but yeah, 2 years. It's been a wild 2 years, but the podcast.
It was the most wild 2 years in most of our generation's lives. Let's be real here.
Mm-hmm. That's yeah. But the podcast
Also,
was...
we may have one of my professors listening at this
Uh-oh.
point. So,
Oh, really?
Hello.
Dr. Hackett, if you're listening, and I know you
Hello.
are,
Shout out to you.
Thank you for being a professor and listening to the podcast.
Yes. Hopefully your drive in from Jasper every day will be enlivened a little bit by our mimetic commentary.
Yes.
Hopefully this doesn't color your perception of Riley.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to. He's got a pretty good idea. It might open his eyes to a different side of me for sure. But
Let's be real, that's the realest side.
well, speaking
yeah.
of seeing different sides of things,
We're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I am Nathan.
and I'm Riley.
Today, we are doing a little episode of Filmosophical
Once more.
on the film Knives Out.
In a world where one man will decide whether to pull a lever and kill one man, or not pull a lever and allow 5 people to die, find out in Filmosophical.
This is quite the philosophical streak. This is like, what, 3 or 4 episodes?
I mean, there was a streak where we did a lot of games in a row, too.
That's true.
We've been on streaks before. It's like, I don't know. It's,
The order is
actually the only the second consecutive film.
Who is Robo calling me at this hour of the day?
at this time of the...
You did Clone Wars 2 weeks ago,
That was a show.
but
That's
That
true.
was Serial.
there was a one break in a series of this will be 4 films in there. So
It
maybe
doesn't
we'll
really
mix
matter.
it up.
Maybe
But
we will.
but Knives Out. The knives, they do be out.
Indeed, they do be out. This is a film that came out in 2019 by Ryan Johnson as the director and producer and writer. So it's like, wow, you did a good thing after Star Wars. Never mind.
Yeah.
So the movie opens up at the 85th birthday of one Harlan Thrombey. This guy is a rich and successful author. He has written a successful series of murder mystery type novels, and he's old and rich. He's old and rich,
And the family's kind of circling around.
like a pack of buzzards waiting for whatever happens when it happens.
So they can get their inheritance.
So he's in his room after his 85th birthday party, and he goes and everyone wakes up the next morning to find him dead. His throat was slit, and it was an apparent suicide. But the police show up and start investigating and asking around about the night before. Among them is one Detective Benoit Blanc.
LeBlanc. Yeah, Ben LeBlanc. Let's go with that.
Benoit Blanc. Anyway, Detective Blanc is played by Daniel Craig. He is a old-fashioned Southern gentleman type, and he is, one of your classical.
There has been a murder, and you are a suspect.
Everyone here is a suspect. So
Let me just go get settled in real quick.
Anyway, he interviews all the family members and gets the lowdown on what happened last night, play by play.
Or does he?
Well, he gets everyone's perspective there, right?
True.
So it's like he hears about all the arguments that they had amongst themselves and about the argument Harlan had with his grandson the night before, and how everyone has some disagreement or beef with him. Like his daughter gets found out for using his granddaughter's like college money on vacations and stuff.
And her husband's cheating on her.
That and like his other son wants him to sell the film rights to his books, but he's like, no, I don't want to do that. Netflix sucks.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of get all the angles of everybody that was there. And then the last person to be interviewed is Harlan's nurse, who is named Marta Cabrera. Cabrera, yeah. And Marta has a unique quirk about her personality where she is physically incapable of lying. She gets physically ill and throws up if she tries to tell a lie. And through a flashback right before the interview, we learn the truth of Harlan's death. So her and Harlan were upstairs. She was attending to him because she's his nurse and all that. And she's been like the only person who actually cares about him. Everyone else is very. He raised a selfish family of rich people,
and he's sort of in a reflective stage of his life where he's like, my relationships with these people are all screwed up.
And so, anyway, she's up there administering his medications before she goes to bed, and she looks at the bottle and realizes, oh, crap, I just injected you with, like, way too much morphine instead of your regular... I gave you the dose of your other medicine with morphine. I mixed them up. I don't know how I did that, but we need to get you to a hospital or you're going to die. I don't have the antidote in my bag for that, so we need to get you to a hospital. He's like, there's no time. If you say it's going to kill me in 5 minutes, I'll be dead before they arrive, and you'll be the person that killed me. And you killing me is not a thing I want to happen or people to know about because you're kind of in a rough situation and you're stuff like that. And I like you, and I don't want you to undergo all that. So how about, here's your alibi. I'm going to create an alibi for you. We're going to make this airtight, and I'm going to slit my own throat, and that it'll look like a suicide. That way you'll be cleared, and I'll be dead anyway. I was going to be dead either way. And this disturbs her, but she kind of goes along with it. And so now the next day, after he's gone through with his plan, it's like, okay, I've got to tell the parts of the truth that reinforce my alibi, but not outright lie to him, because then I'll be given away. And he learned about my secret about lying.
Mm-hmm.
And so she gives him the pieces of the story that exonerate her. Even though everything didn't quite go as smoothly as they would have liked the night before. She was, I believe, even seen by Harlan's mother, who is very getting on in years, if he's 85.
Mm-hmm.
But she seems to mistake him for Harlan's grandson, Ransom, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so she gets questioned and says her piece, and Detective Blanc's like, okay, I'll accept that. Let's do some investigating around the grounds. And so the next day, he accompanies her. They accompany each other as they go around the grounds, and she shows him around and looks for clues and actively tries to hide some clues that she may have left or not, which is, tampering with evidence and stuff. But she's trying to get away with a murder she kind of didn't commit, but kind of did.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so after that day of investigation, we come to the will reading, right? And this is the part everyone's wringing their hands over. It's like, ooh, we're gonna read the will now.
Yep.
And finally, everybody, the whole family's there. His grandson Ransom had stormed out the door the night before after an argument, so he wasn't there during the questioning. This is their first time meeting Chris Evans.
Mm-hmm.
So they all go into the drawing room or wherever.
He's
the lawyer.
kind of defiant and doesn't like any of his family.
Nobody likes any of him either. So it's like nobody likes each other in this family. They just pretend to get along well enough to be in line to inherit some part of the fortune. But when they read the will, it finds out he had left everything to his nurse, Marta.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody is happy with that, accusing her of all sorts of things. And now she's kind of in the public eye and in the news. And she's like, why is this happening to me?
Mm-hmm.
Leave me alone.
This leaves a lot more suspicion on her, not just from the family.
Indeed. She relieved, and in the, heat of the argument at the house after the will reading, Ransom takes her aside and gets her, she gets in his getaway car and they drive away to just find some alone time. She's like, why did you pull me out of there? He's like, I don't like those people anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, you have my grandfather's fortune now. What you gonna do? And she's like, I don't know, because I may have been the one that killed him. And he's like, oh, well, that's unfortunate. Well, she confides in him and tells him the story. He's like, well, if they did find the morphine in his blood and stuff, they could find you, they could hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you would lose your right to the inheritance.
Yep.
So you kind of don't want that to come to light now, do you? And she's like, no, I don't. And it's like, well, I'll be there to help you out if you need it. Next day, she gets a blackmailing, threatening letter that has a partial scan of his toxology report. I believe she believes the letter was sent by one of her nurse friends who was at the party the other night.
Yep.
So she gets a little freaked out, goes to the pharmacy to try and destroy the original record, but the pharmacy's already been burned down. And she's like, oh dear. So her and Ransom are in the car like, well, what now? Then the cops and Detective Blanc show up. It's like, better car chase away from here. Or is the car chase after? Anyway,
I forget.
But they get another message to meet Marta's nurse friend at some warehouse. She goes there, and she has already been killed with an overdose of morphine, the way that she believes she killed Harlan. And then she's found there and arrested. She's like, no, I didn't do this. She was like that when I got here. And also the toxology report wasn't there. And so they all go back to the house again. And Detective Blanc is talking with her, and she comes clean about the whole affair. And he's like, interesting. Because I talked to Harlan's mother, and she said she saw Ransom leave the house. And he's like, yeah, but that was me. I was climbing down the trusses, and I broke the trusses. And it's like, interesting. So they go back to the house, and she figures out where her friend hid the toxology report. She has a weed stash above the fireplace or something. So she goes in there and gets that and gives it to Detective Blanc. She's like, there's the evidence that incriminates me. I'm just going to go come clean to the family now. And then Detective Blanc takes one look at the paper, and he's like, well, I've determined the cause of death, and the cause of death is soulless suicide. And she's like, what? So he calls everyone into the drawing room for the here's what happened bit. Because it turns out that the thing that Ransom and Harlan were fighting about on the day of his 85th birthday was as a jab at how much he doesn't like his family. They get into these arguments all the time, right?
Yep.
So Harlan let slip that, yeah, I'm leaving everything to Marta in the will. You guys get jack squat. And, Ransom was none too pleased about that.
Yep.
So he had the brilliant plan of switching what medicines were in what vial. And in an attempt to get Marta to accidentally OD and kill him so that she wouldn't be eligible for his inheritance, so that Ransom could get a cut. And in saying this, Detective Blanc leaves a jar of two jars on the table of medicine, one of morphine and one of the other medicine. And so Marta picks up the morphine jar, and she's like, I can't believe I messed that up. And he's like, well, you didn't. Those two were not marked. You picked up the morphine instinctually because you're a good nurse who knows her stuff. You know the look and viscosity of it.
And the weight, the difference of the weight, and so forth.
You would have saved him had the ambulance arrived. In fact, he wouldn't have needed saving.
Because he was perfectly fine.
And so they get Ransom to admit he was behind the whole thing and orchestrated even the blackmailing.
Because there was also the dog that barked at him when he was coming and going from the yard. Everybody heard the dog bark.
And Harlan's mother was correct. She did see Ransom climb up the trusses and back down. It's just nobody pays her any mind because she's old and kind of
senile,
vacant in her just sitting around. So Ransom gets arrested, and Marta gets her inheritance. All the family is peeved about it, and that's the end of the movie. Mystery solved.
Yep.
So yeah, moving on to cool stuff about the movie. I've talked about the plot. What do you guys think is some cool stuff?
Let's see. It's refreshing to see a modern take on the whodunit.
Oh yeah,
in a way that's faithful to the genre, as it were.
But also adds a clever twist to it. Because the first act of the movie, when we're getting all the interviews, it is very much a whodunit. Because you don't have all the information, and you're piecing it together at the same rate as Detective Blanc is. But then they spoil who the killer is.
Yep.
And now it's like, well, how does she avoid getting whodunited?
Didn't she fake out to she faked out Ransom to get him to confess?
Because her nurse friend was injured in like the bomb that blew up at the warehouse or whatever. And so she gets a call on her phone and says, it turns out she's okay, and she confessed to everything.
Yep.
And Ransom's like, okay, I did it, you got me. And promptly Marta pukes on him because she was bald-faced lying.
He attempts to kill her too.
Right, that too.
So he's arrested for attempted murder of her and attempted murder.
Two counts of attempted murder.
Yep. Because it turned out that her friend was like dead before she got to the hospital.
Yeah.
And so, but it worked.
Yeah, it worked to get him to confess, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they do definitely have some like modern filming techniques. Like they have these like Office style cutaways when you're talking to certain characters early on. So.
Right, when we're getting the interviews in.
It's funny because when you can see there are little bits of perspective playing through, because in the story there's like this shot of him like blowing out the candles on his birthday cake, and depending on who's telling the story, they're the one closest to him and smiling at the birthday cake with him.
Right.
That was kind of a cool. I like that touch. Those little.
How they see themselves in the picture.
Yep.
But then also we would get like a bit of footage from the party, right? And we would hear two people's perspective about it back to back, and they would be like polar opposite.
Yep. Yep. There's each, even though each of them had, each member of the family had like their beef with their grandpa / dad. Like the daughter was probably the closest one to him, even though she wasn't perfect. And so they had these games and ciphers and invisible ink they would send each other. And so even from the grave, her dad managed to
leave her an invisible ink message saying, by the way, your husband's cheating on you.
Yep. And that's the thing too. Like everybody at the beginning of the movie, in classic whodunit sense, everybody has a motive to have killed the dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real twist at the end is like, actually nobody killed him. He did die by suicide. So, but then, the guy wrote mystery novels, and so it sort of played in, like, regardless of whether, I think the movie implies that he really thought he was going to die.
Oh yeah.
I guess it's somewhat ambiguous. Obviously not condoning suicide by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of interesting. I think
it was funny, even as she was like digging through her bag frantically to find the antidote. He was casually just trying to keep the mood light. Like, I should write this down for my next novel. This is a really interesting way, and it's untraceable, you say.
Yep. Yeah. The thing with the dog barking at Ransom was good too, and it was also kind of a reference because, like, you notice in the movie, like, these dogs hate him, but they love
Marta. They didn't bark at Marta.
Yep, and that's something that the detective notes too. Is like you can kind of trust a dog in their judgment of character to an extent, and that I believe that is sort of an homage to one of the Sherlock Holmes stories where it was talking about the dog that didn't bark, which that story led to that saying, because there was a dog that didn't bark, so it knew the person who
did the crime.
Yep.
Yeah, and
So
the dog is like a really classic symbol in art of loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how. I think Rian Johnson is an arty enough director that he's probably aware of that.
Yeah,
and would be pretty on the nose about having the dogs be the loyal guardians of the house.
But it was also just a great mystery story in the way that it set up every twist, so that when the detective tells you the twist, it's like, oh yeah, I should have seen that too.
Everything clicks into place.
It's like the sort of thing you could piece together alongside the detective when you're given the
But
same
there's a little bit of sleight of hand going on, because even though you
bit.
have all the pieces, you're kind of distracted by the narrative to the point where once the reveal happens, that's when it's clicked into place. So that's kind of masterful, like
it's really well put together.
Mystery storytelling, yeah. I don't know. The funniest thing to me in this whole movie is just Chris Evans being a complete like a-hole to his family. Because for years he's done like the Boy Scout, Captain America type. But just watching him be complete, like basically saying screw you to his whole family.
I think the performance from Scott Pilgrim being the vegan super machine was
that too
was enough to make this role not feel out of place.
Or no, he was like the action movie guy.
I thought
the vegan was somebody else.
Yeah.
He was the actor who was a real mean person to his fans. Anyway,
and he dies on a rail.
But also, I feel like having Chris Evans, who has been kind of typecast as the good guy for a bit, and making him the bad guy after like framing him as the one on Marta's side,
shows his range.
Yeah,
he makes a good villain.
Well, one of my favorite funny little details is how everyone like, oh, they speak so highly of Marta. She's been taking care of our father for so long, and and everybody
like super condescendingly,
right? But also everyone whenever anybody talks about her, they all say her family's from a different country. It's like, oh, they're from Paraguay, they're from Guatemala.
Yeah,
she's from Mexico, right?
I forget where she was. I think she was actually like a native citizen, but like her mom was.
Well, her mom immigrated, not legally, which is one of the tensions of the film, where it's like, if I get exposed, they're gonna look into me and my family, and they're gonna find that out, deportation, and so all that stuff was kind of a tension of her plight, right?
Right, and they couldn't afford to get it litigated, so now that she's inherited the fortune, they can do that now.
Right.
Get her citizenship. So yeah, that was there's all kinds of cool things, and it's a very delightfully put together movie. It's sort of a redemption for The Last Jedi, like we alluded to earlier. It's like, okay, so Rian Johnson,
this one does plot twists and subversion of expectation
right
well.
Yeah. Yep.
But no, one thing I think is interesting is it's kind of in its characters and in its characterization. It is of its time. It's a very 2019 movie politically, where they have kind of some of those conversations. But also, I feel like historically, mystery novels have been about and of the time they're set in.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and they didn't like overdo it and say, "Oh, Trump bad,"
Yep.
But there was, the kind of political discussions you have at a family gathering.
Yep.
That get heated and you don't get along.
Yep.
So it felt like of its time, but also that kind of is part of the.
It doesn't take away from.
It doesn't take away from it, and it kind of is part and parcel to the whodunit genre almost.
Yeah. The
other
thing I thought was really cool is how they introduced the detective, because there's like an actual police detective conducting the initial interviews,
right? Whereas
he's just sort of sitting in the background,
kind of a private investigator.
He's sitting in the background, like not even in focus. You don't really notice him for a little bit, but every time somebody tells a fib, he just hits a note on the piano. So he's like, the movie gives you that shorthand. It's like, okay, he's kind of quirky and idiosyncratic, but he's really smart.
But he's very smart and observant.
Yeah.
Which makes the tension even higher when him and Marta are investigating and stuff. You're like, he's going to find her out.
Yep.
The killer always gets found out in a whodunit, and this is a classic whodunit style detective.
Yep.
He's going to find out.
Yep.
So it really had this great tension where both your protagonists that are really enjoyable characters.
And even though like she's trying to evade his investigation, he never stops believing in her the whole time as like the one genuinely good person in the whole story.
Right.
And there's some tension coming from that too, because there's like a little bit of imposter syndrome going on for her.
She's like, I'm not being a good person though. I'm passively lying to you, and this doesn't sit so well with my tummy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just another thing. The characters in this movie are fun. Even the unlikable ones are unlikably fun.
Like comedically unlikable.
Exactly.
So, any other observations of cool things, Riley? It's been a while since I watched it, like about a year or so.
The last time I watched it was over quarantine with you guys. So
That's
sure.
right. That's when we watched it. Yep.
yeah, so
Probably
It
should
has
have
been
watched
one-
it, but
yeah, we probably should have. But it's
Yeah. But it left
Yeah.
enough of an impression to be like, yeah, I can talk about this.
Mhm.
It's also getting a sequel this year.
Oh yeah.
I have heard that.
I thought of that before proposing the episode, but I'm like, it'll probably be like different enough in plot and theme and completely
Yeah.
disconnected in the way that these kinds of series are,
Yeah.
where it's just the same detective but a different
Right.
mystery.
A
And-
different scenario to
Kind
solve.
of like I think Murder on the Nile or whatever came out just recently.
and
which
Murder
is
on the
like-
Orient Express happened like the year before
Yep.
Knives Out did,
And it's a sequel, so it's
which those are both adaptations of what, Agatha Christie novels?
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I did get my offer.
Knives Out is original.
Knives Out is original, yes, which is actually also refreshing in this day and age of
Yeah.
Hollywood. It's
And
like,
it did very well too.
It did. Was that a Netflix original?
It was
It
a
was on-
Prime original.
It was on
a Prime. Okay, Amazon Prime.
One of
Yep.
the few redeeming pieces of media Prime originals have put out.
Yep.
Mm.
Very few. But
It's
definitely
it's the
probably
only one
best.
I can think of off the top of my head.
Mm.
Yeah. It's one of the best.
Then again, I haven't seen many Prime originals. Not like I really intend to.
I
for a
forget that I
while.
have it most of the time because I go on to Prime and like buy movies to watch usually.
Well, it's the stupid thing that they make you buy it even though you have the subscription.
Yeah.
It's like, what good does this do if I can only get shovelware for free?
Yeah. It's like if you had to pay for Steam and still buy games from Steam.
That was Google Stadia,
Oh yeah.
and that sucked.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody does that anymore.
Anyhow, should we get into the transcendentals?
Sure.
Alrighty
I
then.
think so.
So truth. What are some truths we can find in Knives Out?
Murder is bad.
Murder bad.
Although the detective makes some observations about truth.
About the concept of truth itself. It's like,
yeah.
I forget the exact line, but it's like truth can be. He does some truth math where he's like, you can follow the trajectory of truth to where it lands, and I don't solve. What's he say? I don't.
He's like, I don't solve mysteries. I just find the truth.
I just find the truth where it lands. I see the signs. I follow the trajectory, and the truth makes itself apparent. And it's like
It's
the
clear
truth
that
will
he's
set-
read some Heidegger.
Probably.
quite
The
possible.
truth reveals itself to us. The long and short of it is Heidegger has a definition of truth that he thinks is more fundamental than the Western tradition's typical definition of adequation or correspondence. So it's the classic tradition in Western philosophy is truth as correspondence, namely that my concept of a thing is in accordance with the thing in reality. But Heidegger believes that it's more so unhiddenness, because he pulls that out of an etymological exploration of the Greek word aletheia, which is like not letheia, veiled, so like unveiling. So that's an interesting insight by our detective.
Indeed. So yeah, it's ultimately kind of about the search for truth, right?
Yep. Because, and to not to be too cliche, but the truth will set you free is basically what ends up happening in the
In the
movie.
case of Marta, anyway,
Yeah.
it did quite the opposite for Ransom.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
that
the
was
number
just-
of other characters
Yeah.
in
indeed.
tangential ways.
Indeed.
Yeah, each of the family members is like something they're being dishonest about, or some flaw of theirs
That
to some degree.
that Harlan is observant enough and knows about, and
Yep.
so part of his last "I don't like you" to his family as he's being lowered into the grave is to subtly
Although he's
reveal
partially
them to everybody.
he's partially motivated by a notion of justice too. Like these
Indeed.
people are just kind of grasping at something that really they have no right to, and behaving in an entitled fashion and just.
And so he finds a way to let the truth expose itself and make itself known.
He has a mug that says "My house, my rules," and then at the end of the movie, who's sipping out of that mug?
It's
Marta.
Marta.
Yep. So
that was a very fun parallels. Like, this is the justice being delivered.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Goodness. Unless there's any other truth things we could talk about.
I think that's
most of it.
Most of the point they was trying to make. Yeah.
Goodness. I think ultimately Marta is the good character.
Ultimately, yeah.
Even though she thinks that she's committed murder and is.
But it was entirely unintentional.
Right.
During her care of Harlan. She was the only person who legitimately cared about and for Harlan.
And that her believing that she had killed him through malpractice just eats away at her.
Yeah.
And
it just utterly destroys her.
To the point where she's willing to give up this fortune instead of being dishonest.
And her aversion to dishonesty is
manifested.
Literally physical.
It's literally physical, but it's also admirable.
Yep.
So even when she's struggling to be a good person, trying to do a dishonest thing.
Yep.
And it hurts her.
But in the end, ends up that she's completely, like, those good intentions were, in fact, they paid off for her because she didn't mess up. She didn't kill Harlan. So.
And then you also got the character of Daniel Craig's character, Detective Blanc, who is just gentlemanly and polite to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he
is a British man trying to do a southern accent.
Yeah.
And it's a little exaggerated and a little over the top, but honestly,
that's kind of the whodunit thing, is being over the top.
You get these detective characters, and they're very much characters.
Yeah.
You know, you got your Sherlock Holmes with all of his idiosyncrasies.
It's part of the
stuff.
charm.
It is. And I was charmed by it. That was a fun character.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like got this insight for people, right?
Yep.
He can look at somebody and kind of get them.
Yep.
So him and Marta, he connected with her because, like, you're the only really honest one here, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And then even later in the movie, he's just kind of hanging around the estate, and there's Grandma kind of sitting, looking vacantly into the distance, and he sits down next to her. She doesn't really acknowledge him, but he has a conversation with her. He's like, I'm sure at your age there's a lot of things you want to say but can't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You probably see and know more than anybody else here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
but
how
you don't
he
get no respect.
So by giving her the respect and engagement, he actually gets a key piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
But like he thought to sat down and talk to her like a human being, not like a piece of furniture you got to move around occasionally.
Yep.
Which is kind of how her family has treated her for several years.
Yep.
So you've got just him as a character is charming and is kind and is well-meaning and is just out seeking the truth.
Yep.
Wherever it brings him and wherever it lands. Those are like the good characters.
Yep.
We don't get to see much of Harlan, but he was, kind of rude to his family and the fact that they were rude to him. But,
but kind in his own way.
Right. He was very, like, grandfatherly to Marta. They had a real good rapport. And
like they had a game they played every night.
It was
a Mancala or something like that?
It was Go.
Go, okay, that's what it was.
The black and white tile one, I think.
Yep. And she always beat him.
Mm-hmm. Now, perhaps he let her beat him, but But
and that was the thing. Ransom could never beat him at Go.
Oh, and that was one of the things. It's like, I think actually in their argument conversation, he's like, he told me you could beat him at Go. I never could.
Yep. So beauty. The cinematography is pretty great.
Really
the
well
editing
shot.
is really snappy and good. Really serves the story well.
And the writing of the story itself is really good. The pacing, the way it's framed, and the way it all unfolds, the way the truth unfolds throughout the course of the film.
It all comes it all brings everything to a satisfying conclusion.
Right. It's like you listen to my description of the plot, and it's like not a lot actually happens, but there's a lot of just getting character and getting perspectives
Well, that's the thing about like when the truth comes out in a situation like that. It's like, you know what? It's a lot simpler now that it's out in the open. But
it's the process of getting there and process of like wading through all the lies and all
parsing it out.
All the characters. That's like where the meat of the movie is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done very well.
Yep.
It's like all the... But yeah, there's nothing like notable about the way that it's done. It's like, but it's just done very well.
Mm-hmm.
There's some solid editing and writing and cinematography that really fits the genre. There is some really creative stuff. There's that one chair that he interviews everybody in that just has a wall of knives behind it pointing to them.
Yep.
It's like, for whatever reason, Harlan is an eccentric old man, so he can decorate his house how he wants, and nobody can give him any flack for it.
Yep.
There's just a chair with a bunch of knives pointing at it hanging on the wall.
Yep.
It's like inverse Game of Thrones.
Heavily used in the promotional materials as well.
But
And it's like Ransom grabs one of those knives and tries to kill Marta with it.
But like that's like
it's
the
a
hot
hidden-
seat people sit in when they're interviewing
It's a
them.
hidden Chekhov's gun in a way.
Well, yeah, it's honestly really fits the definition because it's hanging on the wall and it gets used in the third act.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, oh yeah.
So they throw some classic tropes together in a way that works.
And I think it's just kind of refreshing. You get this pure, unadulterated whodunit with all the classic tropes, but with like a kind of a fresh twist on it also.
Yeah.
It's like they didn't have to do anything fancy, and they kind of didn't. It just was done really well.
Mm-hmm.
I rather enjoyed it.
Any other beauty things to talk about?
Yeah, I just enjoyed the old-timey aesthetic. Is that kind of...
Yeah, even though it was like
it was
modern
set in
day.
2019, right?
Right.
Modern day 2019.
But then it's still like this old-timey style mansion, and the detective's wearing like a full tweed suit type of deal, and
yeah.
It matches the old-timey aesthetics with the old-timey
vaguely
storytelling style.
1930s.
Right. It has an aesthetic that fits with the general vibe, and it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unity, what brings it all together?
I think once again it's the truth.
Yeah.
That search for truth, and that because like even Marta's main like character gimmick is that she can't lie. She has to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this concept of the truth setting you free, the truth making itself apparent over time.
Yep.
It's the truth is inevitable.
Yeah.
And, you know, he is inevitable, the truth.
Yeah.
I am inevitable.
Indeed. Any further observations?
On Unity?
Cool. Well,
Cool.
and in that case, thanks for listening to The Palladium Papists. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating to let us know what you think. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Papists. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapists@gmail.com. We'll catch you guys again in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.